would not be called on election night.
My belief, my recommendation was to say that votes were still being counted. It's too early to tell, too early to call the race, but we proud of the race we ran, and we think we're in good position, and we'll have more to say about this the next day or the next day, whenever we had something to say.
And did anybody who was a part of that conversation disagree with your message?
Yes.
Who was that?
The president disagreed with that. I don't recall the particular words. He thought I was wrong. He told me so, and that they were going to go he was going to go in a different direction.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did.
Mr. Steiwalt, did President Trump have any basis to declare victory on November 4th, 2020? Thank you. Mr. Stepien also testified that President Trump had no basis for declaring victory at that point in time.
My belief, my recommendation was to say that votes were still being counted. It's too early to tell, too early to call the race, but we proud of the race we ran, and we think we're in good position, and we'll have more to say about this the next day or the next day, whenever we had something to say.
Thank you. Mr. Steiwalt, after the votes were counted, who won the presidential election of 2020?
Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. of the great state of Delaware.
Thank you. That's the bottom line. We've had an election. Mr. Trump lost, but he refused to accept the results of the democratic process. Pursuant to Section 5C8 of House Resolution 503, I now recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Steiwalt, I'd like you to explain a term that was thrown around a lot during the election, and that's the so-called red mirage. What does that mean?
So, in the 40 or 50 years, let's say, that Americans have increasingly chosen to vote by mail or early or absentee, Democrats prefer that method of voting more than Republicans do. So basically, in every election, Republicans win Election Day and Democrats win the early vote. And then you wait and start counting, and it depends on which ones you count first, but usually it's Election Day votes that get counted first.
James
and
Rocks
you see the
18
Republicans
cheered.
shoot
Here's
ahead,
some monies.
and then the process of bailing and binding and unbinding all those mail-in votes. And some states like Pennsylvania refuse to count the votes first, so you have to wait for all of that to come in. So in every election, and certainly a national election, you expect to see the Republican with a lead, but it's not really a lead. When you put together a jigsaw puzzle, it doesn't matter which piece you put in first, it ends up with the same image. So for us, who cares? But that's because no candidate had ever tried to avail themselves of this quirk in the election counting system. We had gone to pains, and I'm proud of the pains we went to make sure that we were informing viewers that this was going to happen, because the Trump campaign and the president had made it clear that they were going to try to exploit this anomaly, and we knew it was going to be bigger because the percentage of early votes was higher, right? We went from about 45% of the votes being early and absentee to, because of the pandemic, that increased by about 50%. So we knew it would be longer, we knew it would be more. So we wanted to keep telling viewers, hey, look, the number that you see here is sort of irrelevant because it's only a small percentage of these votes.
So this red mirage, that's really what you expected to happen on election night.
Happens every time.
Thank you, Mr. Steyerwalt. Now, I'd like to play a clip of Attorney General Bill Barr, who also explains what was expected to happen on election night.
Right out of the box on election night, the president claimed that there was major fraud underway. I mean, this happened, as far as I could tell, before there was actually any potential of looking at evidence. And it seemed to be based on the dynamic that
DJ War 2 Sparkler.
at the end of the evening, a lot of Democratic
War 2.
votes came in, which changed the vote counts in certain states, and that seemed to be the basis for this broad claim that there was major fraud. And I didn't think much of that because people had been talking for weeks, and everyone understood for weeks that that was going to be what happened on election night.
Mr. Stepien obviously could not be with us today, and it's proper for him to be with his wife as they welcome their child. But he also had discussions with the president about the red mirage. That is, that it would be a long night and that early votes would favor him, but that lots more votes would be counted over the course of the night and the days after. So let's play clip 1 from our interview with Mr. Stepien.
I recounted back to that conversation with him, in which I said, just like I said in 2016 was going to be a long night. I told him in 2020 that it was going to be a process again, as the early returns are going to be positive, and we're going to be watching the returns of ballots as they rolled in thereafter.
So is it fair to say you're trying to present what you thought would be a realistic picture of what might happen over the course of that night, being election night?
That night and the days that followed. Yeah, I always told the president the truth, and I think he expected that from me, and I told him it was going to be a process. It was going to be, we're going to have to wait and see how this turned out. So I just like I did in 2016, I did the same thing in 2020.
So let's watch a short clip of President Trump speaking after he received that information from his campaign advisors.
We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list.
So when former President Trump said that, it contradicted what his advisors had warned would happen. We all know that mail-in ballots played an important role in the 2020 election. However, President Trump continuously discouraged mail-in voting. Mr. Stepien was so concerned about the president's position on mail-in voting that in the summer of 2020, he met with President Trump along with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Let's play clip 4.
Meeting that was had, in particular, I invited Kevin McCarthy to join the meeting, he being of like mind on the issue with me, in which we made our case for why we believed mail-in voting not to be a bad thing for his campaign. But the president's mind was made up, and he understands, how many times to, go to the well on a particular topic.
Yeah, I understand. Tell me a little bit more about the argument that you and Mr. McCarthy made to the president in that meeting as to why it wasn't a bad thing that mail-in voting was available.
Largely two pillars to that argument, both of which I've previously mentioned. One, leaving a good deal to chance, pushing or urging your voters to vote only on election day leaves a lot to chance. That's A. And B, also previously mentioned, the fact that the Trump campaign, Republican National Committee, the Republican Party had an advantage of grassroots workers and volunteers on the ground that would allow, an advantage to enhance return rates of ballots that were mailed. Those were the two pillars of the argument.
I see. And what, if anything, do you recall Representative McCarthy saying during that meeting?
We were echoing the same argument. I mean, his words echoed mine, and vice versa on those two topics.
Mr. Stirewalt, you were at the decision desk at Fox News on election night, and you called Arizona early for President Biden, which was controversial. How did you make that call, and where did you think the race stood in the early hours of the next day?
Well, it was really controversial to our competitors who we beat so badly by making the correct call first. Our decision desk was the best in the business, and I was very proud to be a part of it. Because we had partnered with the Associated Press and the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago, thanks to my colleague and friend Arnon Mishkin, had built a wonderful device for forecasting the outcomes of elections. So we had a different set of data than our competitors did. We had more research, and we had a better system, and we had a great team. So what you're waiting to see is, do the actual votes match up with the expectations in the poll? The real votes are testing the quality of your poll in targeted precincts and in targeted places. And let me tell you, our poll in Arizona was beautiful, and it was doing just what we wanted it to do, and it was cooking up just right. And at some point, and I forget exactly who, but at some point it became clear that Arizona was getting ready to make a call. So we, my boss, Bill Salmon, said we're not making any call until everybody says yes, because that was always our policy, unanimity. And you have to understand, in this room, you have, the best people from academia, Democrats, Republicans, a broad cross-section of people who had worked together for a decade, who are really serious about this stuff. So we knew it would be a consequential call because it was one of 5 states that really mattered, right? Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona were the ones that we were watching. We knew it would be significant to call any one of those 5, but we already knew Trump's chances were very small and getting smaller based on what we had seen. So we were able to make the call early. We were able to beat the competition. We looked around the room, everybody says yay, and on we go. And by the time we found out how much everybody was freaking out and losing their minds over this call, we were already trying to call the next state. We had already moved on. We were to Georgia, we were to North Carolina, we were looking at these other states.
James Ross 18
we thought it was, we were pleased, but not surprised.
I see. After the election, as of November 7th, in your judgment, what were the chances of President Trump winning the election?
After that point?
Yes.
None. I mean, I guess it's always possible that you could have, a truckload of ballots be found somewhere, I suppose. But once you get into this space, ahead of today, I thought about what are the largest margins that could ever be overturned by a recount, and the kind of stuff that we heard Mike Pence talking about, sounding like a normal Republican that night when he said, we'll keep every challenge. Nothing like that. In a recount, you're talking about hundreds of votes. When we think about calling a race, one of the things that we would think about is it outside the margin of a recount? And when we think about that margin, we think about, in modern history, you're talking about 1,000 votes, 1,500 votes at the way outside. Normally, you're talking about hundreds of votes, maybe 300 votes that are going to change. So the idea that through any normal process in any of these states, remember, he had to do it thrice.
Hi guys,
right?
sorry I'm a
He
little bit
needed
late.
3
This
of these
is
states
way
to
earlier
change.
than I've been waking up
And
lately.
in order to do
I'm
that,
doing my best.
I mean, you're at an infant. You're better
Right
off to
here.
play the Powerball.
We'll crochet, we'll watch
than
this
to
shit.
have that come in.
On November 7th, the other major news outlets called the race for
I am
President Biden.
so
Now,
disgusting,
Mr.
and I'm
Stepien
so,
told
so
the committee
sorry.
that he thought the odds were, and this is a quote, very, very, very bleak, and held a meeting with the president that same day. Let's show clip 8, video clip 8.
I mean, with each day that wore on, I mean, the trajectory of the race, you know, on election night, Trump ahead.
No. My
In many
sticker came
states.
off in the wash.
And as that week wore on, as the third
Oh,
became the
no.
fourth, became the fifth,
I'll have to put
and
a
so
new
on and
one
so
on.
forth.
I don't have
The
any
vote
clear
by mail
coat, though.
ballots were tabulated. You know, Trump's lead, you know, grew more narrow, and in some places, Biden surpassed, you know, Trump in the vote totals. So as the week wore on,
Volvo, yeah, this is
as we
about the
paid
attack
attention
on
to
the
those numbers
Capitol.
multiple times a day, you know, internally.
Trying to
you
stop
know, I was feeling less confident for sure.
the vote.
What was your view on the state of the election at that point?
Joey P. Pants.
You know,
How
very,
are you? Oh my
very,
God.
very bleak.
It's so good to see you. I
know,
love you, bud.
We told him, you know, the group that went over there outlined, you know, my belief in chances for
Oh, fuck, that
success
coffee
at this
is
point.
slapping.
And then we pegged it at you know 5, maybe 10% based on
I have to
recounts that
message
were that you know
Big
either
Baboose real
were
quick. He's
automatically
still
initiated
asleep.
or could be
James, thanks for
could
the
be
bit.
initiated based on
I'm doing
you know
pretty good,
realistic
Joe.
legal challenges,
Thank you.
not all the legal challenges that eventually were pursued. But you know it was you know
Yeah, if only
My
I
belief is
could
that it's
choose
very,
the time of
5 to 10%.
sedition hearings, hey?
it's not a very good optimistic outlook.
Now, as President Trump and others continued to claim that the election was stolen, there were lawyers who were a part of the campaign lawyers, who were responsible for investigating the fraud claims. That includes Alex Cannon, who could not validate the claims that were being made, including those being made by the president. Let's roll video 13.
What am I
This is an
crocheting?
email.
Do exclamation
It's 2
point
emails,
pattern
actually. The first
in
is from
chat
Alex
for the
Cannon
project
to
details.
you
There's a
and
picture
Faith
of what it'll look
McPherson.
like when it's finished.
And then you forward that
And
email on to
the
Mark
free pattern
Meadows,
too,
Justin Clark,
if
and
you are a
Jason Miller.
crocheter.
The
I'm gonna
subject
drink this
being
coffee,
AZ
to be
federal
honest,
ID voters.
before anything else happens.
If you
I'm
look at
drinking
the
this
original
coffee.
email there, it
So
says, Bill,
actually,
we completed
here's
the
a good
AZ
idea.
analysis you requested. I assume that's about Arizona. And because
Let's
of the
do
substantial
this.
uncertainty surrounding the databases, this is a highly unreliable way to identify ineligible
I'm so
voters.
sorry.
Can you explain the task that you
Oh my
gave
God.
to Ms. Cannon
Eric gifted 10 subs and I
for
was
this
not here.
Arizona analysis?
So this is just gonna happen.
Sure.
I'm so sorry.
Previously, I described some of my frustration with some of the claims that
Thank
people
you, Eric.
would
You're the
throw at
best.
President Trump regarding, you know,
Nice.
need to look at this, you know, this happened in this state, or that happened in that state. And it would be, you know, those would flow to us.
I would
look
be able
into.
to turn
Talk
down
about
the
that.
video, but I cannot
You know,
turn up my
This
voice.
is an example of that. I recall in Arizona, someone had thrown out, I believe this to be the claim, that there were thousands of illegal citizens, people not eligible to vote, having cast their ballots in Arizona. Someone had thrown out that claim to President Trump. And with, you know, the margins.
Yeah, the
being
rest of the
as close as
council
they were,
didn't
as
count,
previously
didn't
described,
confer
you know,
with me on when the
that could
meetings would
potentially
be,
matter.
when the hearings would be today.
So this wild claim is
Wait a minute,
thrown
I'll
out,
have to have a
which,
word with
you know,
them.
on its face didn't seem, you know, realistic or possible to me.
With
I
Judge
asked
Benny.
Alex to look at the
Nice.
the claim. And I haven't read his full email, but I recall the response to that. The reality of that was not illegal citizens voting in the election.
Hi, Matt Cave. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Batcave 696 Sparkler. Good morning, Doxy.
Good
Happy
morning.
3 months. Bless you,
When
buddy.
these
Keep up the
findings
good
were
work.
passed
Lucid Duck
up the
Teddy Bear.
chain to President Trump, he became frustrated and he replaced the campaign's legal team. Let's play clip 14.
Wait, what's going on in America today? These are the sedition hearings.
It was during the second week where things like you displayed were
We're laying the groundwork to prove that Trump broke the law sufficiently to be prosecuted.
His team, me less so,
And like a bunch of his cabinet too, I think.
But still me.
Smarter and more.
Justin Clark. And that kind of.
What's the word I'm looking for?
Paved
It's
the way
funny
for,
that this is the word I'm
Justin
looking for.
to be moved out
More
and Mary Juliana to be moved
articulate
in as
people
person
than
in
me
charge of,
in chat will probably be able
the
to
legal
explain
side
it
of the
better.
Campaign, and for all intents and purposes, campaign at that point.
If Joe is still in here.
Now, when Mr. Stepien
That dude's got smarts.
became campaign manager, he was the second Trump campaign manager for the 2020 race, and there were only about 115 days until Election Day. So let's play
Dude in the back looks
the
like he
video.
could be Apocalypto, Tyler's brother. You got smarts, Joe. You got smarts. Why don't you ever visit your mother? Your sister's a doctor and she visits. She finds time.
2020 daily average polling.
You got
against,
so many
President
smarts,
Biden.
kid.
It was a campaign at a low point in the polls. It was structurally and fiscally deficient. There was a great deal wrong with the campaign in both of those in both of those areas. So most of my day.
Since when did Doxy join the mafia? I started the motherfucking mafia. You watch your mouth.
Most of my time spent fixing the things that could be fixed with 115 days left in the campaign.
Now,
That's
Mr.
so
Stepien,
okay, Lil.
has been in the
That's so
campaign
okay.
field for a long time, and he worked for lots of different candidates and campaigns. He testified to this committee
Hi,
about
Oz.
his concerns given the claims that Mr. Giuliani and Ms. Powell and their team were making publicly. Let's play clip 15.
Okay, and was it important for you, Mr. Stepien, to sort of pull back just for your own professional reputation? You didn't want to be associated with some of what you were hearing from the Giuliani team and others that sort of stepped in the wake of your departure?
I didn't mind being categorized. There were two groups of, we called them kind of my team and Rudy's team. I didn't mind being characterized as being part of Team Normal as reporters, kind of.
Daddy's girl Ivanka gonna sleep with the fishes.
I said, hours ago, early on that, I've been doing this for a long time, 25
She's a real
years,
wise
and
guy.
I've spanned, political ideologies from Trump to McCain to Bush to Christie, and, I can work under a lot of circumstances for a lot of varied, candidates and politicians. But a situation where, and I think along the way I've built up a pretty good, I hope, a good reputation for being honest.
Take
and,
beyond, leave the
professional.
cannoli.
And I didn't think what was happening was necessarily honest or professional at that point in time.
Amazing.
So, that
You
led
make
to
me laugh.
stepping
I'm happy
away.
to see you.
So the president did get rid of Team Normal, and I'd like to play a clip showing that the president found the people he needed to perpetuate his claims of fraud.
They saw a big truck bringing in 100,000 ballots in garbage cans.
That's so okay.
in
And you
waste
have
paper
a
baskets,
baby?
in cardboard
You have a whole
boxes, and
little
in shopping
family going
baskets.
on?
And
I'm
every
never going to
single
hold
one
that
of them was
against you.
provided because they were being notified by Smartmatic
I feel the love
in
anyway,
Frankfurt.
Joey. I know
that
it every
Biden was
day.
way behind,
Me and you.
and they better come up with a lot more ballots, and we can prove every single thing I just said. If you gave me the paper ballots, I could probably turn around each one of these states. I'm absolutely convinced if you let me examine each one of those ballots, I'd pull out enough that were fraudulent that it would shake the hell out of the country.
It can set and run
Really,
an
Joe?
algorithm
I had
that
no
probably ran
idea.
all over the country to take a
Congratulations,
certain
bud.
percentage of votes from President Trump.
That's going to be
and
real
flip them
me and
to
Melinda
President
hours.
Biden,
Good luck with
which
that.
we might never have uncovered had the votes for President Trump not been so overwhelming in so many of these states that it broke the algorithm.
I remember that
That's
one
amazing,
of the
though. I
things
can't wait to
Mark
see all the
said
pictures.
At some point was you can't show an actual vote was flipped, which I found at the time to be a remarkable assertion because because you don't have to have the gun to see the body lying on the floor bleeding out with 5 bullet holes in it was killed by a gun.
What they were proposing, I thought was nuts. You know, the theory was also
I'll send you my
completely nuts,
sleeper hits list, Joe.
right? I mean, there's a combination of Italians, Germans. I mean, different things have been floating around as to who was involved. I remember Hugo Chavez, a Venezuelan. She has an affidavit from somebody who says they wrote a software in, it's something with the Philippines, and just all over the radar.
Did you ever share, Mr. Kushner, your view of Mr. Giuliani? Did you ever share your perspective about him with the president?
She's king! Thank you so much.
I guess
It is an odd stream
Cheese
time.
underscore King 21 Sparkler. This is an odd stream time.
yes.
But it's what time the hearings
Tell me what
were.
he said.
I don't get to
Basically,
choose.
not the approach I would take if I was you.
Okay, and how did he react? How did President Trump react when you shared that view with him?
We said, you know, I have confidence in Rudy.
I think I had conversations with probably all of our council who are signed up to assist on election day as they disengaged with the campaign. The general consensus was that the law firms were not comfortable making the arguments that Rudy Giuliani was making publicly. I seem to recall that I had a similar conversation with most all of them.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit. And, you know, I didn't want to be a part of it, and that's one of the reasons that went into me deciding to leave when I did.
Even Sidney Powell, defending herself in a defamation lawsuit brought by Dominion Voting Systems, argued that, quote, no reasonable person would conclude that her statements were truly statements of fact. Mr. Chairman, I
we
yield
need
back.
we need to be able to do something
the
about that
witness for
shit.
joining
The
us
Tucker
today.
Carlson defense.
first
We
panel
need to be
is
able
now
to do something about
dismissed.
that. People need to be held accountable for the shit that they say, that they know will be taken out of context and be taken as fact. Like that, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to say stupid, seditious shit and expect your
Without
fucking
objection, the chair
drooling
recognizes the
followers
gentlewoman
to
from
not
California, Ms.
storm a
Lawson.
goddamn Capitol about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, we presented the testimony of former Attorney General Bill Barr, who testified before this committee. Today, we present additional evidence, including his testimony that former President Trump started making claims of election fraud immediately after the election, and that Barr concluded the claims were untrue. Now, due to the length of Attorney General Barr's testimony, we're only going to include relevant portions at the hearing today. So let's play the video.
The department, in fact, when we received specific and credible allegations of fraud, made an effort to look into
I think
these.
that we're postured for pretty great things here, Valbo. It's just about whether.
And I was in the posture of trying to figure out. There was an avalanche of all these allegations of fraud that built up over a number of days, and
whether
it was like playing
our
whack-a-mole
government
because
body
something would
will
come
do
out
the
one
right
day,
thing or
and then
not.
the next day it would be another issue. Also, I was influenced by the fact that all the early claims,
I think everything that's been
that I
presented already is
understood
enough to say that he is
were
treasonous.
completely bogus and silly, and usually based on complete misinformation. And so I didn't consider the quality of claims right out of the box to give me any, feeling that there was really substance here.
Platform
For the first
responsibility
time since
legislation
the
is already
election,
around. Common sense,
the Attorney
not
General spoke
pretty
personally
sure
with the
nowadays
President
it's called
on November
uncommon sense.
23rd, and this was at
If you
the
have a
White
link
House.
to that
Let's
legislation,
play
I'd love
the
to read
video,
it over.
please.
So on November 23rd, I hadn't spoken to the president since the election, and in fact, as I said, since the middle of October, roughly. And it was a little getting awkward because obviously.
Sorry, I'm almost done with my coffee. It's slow to drink it right now because it's so hot outside.
Said, I think it's time you come over here.
Canada does not believe in air conditioning.
So I came over to meet with the president in the Oval Office, and Meadows and Cipollone were there.
Hydrate. Don't mind if I do. Thanks for looking out for me.
And this is leading up to this
Appreciate
conversation with Kushner. The president said there had been major fraud, and that as soon as the facts were out, the results of the election
It's going to start raining soon, and hopefully
and he went
cool down
on this for quite a while, as he's prone to do, and then he got to something that I was expecting, which is to
in
say
the
that
UK.
apparently the Department of Justice doesn't think
that's
that,
different.
It has a role of looking into
in America, we have freedom of speech,
that has to be
which,
the campaign that raises
let's be
that
real,
with the
freedom of
state.
speech
The
is
department
important to an
doesn't
extent, but
decide
there are
the
some things that
election,
you
and the
just
department
shouldn't
is
be
not
allowed to
an
say
extension of
hate crimes. You
your
shouldn't be
legal
allowed to
team,
say
and our
treason.
role is to investigate
You just
fraud,
shouldn't
and
be
if
allowed
you
to
look at
say that
something,
stuff.
if it's specific, credible, and could have affected the outcome of the election, and we're doing that, and it's just
You shouldn't
not,
be able to be
they're
Tommy
not, they're just
Loren.
not meritorious.
You shouldn't
They're
be
not
able to do
panning
that.
out. And as I walked out of the Oval Office, Jared was there with Dan Scavino, who ran the president's social media, and who I thought was a reasonable guy and believe is a reasonable guy. And I said, how long is he going to carry on with this stolen election stuff? Where's this going to go? And by that time, Meadows had caught up with me and leaving the office.
I haven't seen any
and
moose.
caught up with me.
I've been up here for a year
said,
and I haven't seen any moose.
He said, look, I think that he's becoming more realistic and knows
People
that
also shouldn't
the
be
limit
allowed
how
to
far
say
he can
swag.
take this.
Okay,
And then
now we're
Jared
going
said,
crazy.
yeah, we're working on this. We're working on it.
You have moose in Colorado, really? I didn't know that.
Even after his Attorney
I
General
love
told him
Colorado.
his claims
I
of
love it
election
there.
fraud were false, President
A mama and
Trump
a baby run
continued
right in
to
front of your
promote
car.
these
Yo,
claims.
you would have been more fucked than either of those animals had you hit that
I
car.
felt that things
or that
continued
moose.
to
My bad.
deteriorate between the 23rd and the weekend of the 29th. And then on November 29th, he appeared on Maria Bartiromo's show, Sunday Futures, I believe it was.
Josiah and I
he said
have
that
an
the
inside joke
department
where whenever I
was
see like a
missing in
pile of leaves or like just anything out of place, I'll make an excuse to blame it on a moose. Like the big one now is there's like
They're fraud, absolute fraud. This election
there's
was
a
over, and then they
block
did
in the
dumps.
creek.
They
Like
call
just a
them
couple of
dumps,
branches
big,
came down and
massive
like a bunch of
dumps.
leaves and stuff,
In
and it looks like a little
Michigan,
dam, and I keep calling it a moose dam.
all over. How the
Those
FBI,
moose dams
Department of Justice,
here in
I don't know,
Canada, they're
maybe
everywhere.
involved, but how people are allowed to get away from this stuff?
It's where the
with
baby
this stuff
moose
is
live.
unbelievable.
Now, spurred by what he saw, Barr told the Associated Press on December 1st that there was no
Me too,
evidence
Joe. I feel
of
lied
election
to.
fraud. And immediately after Attorney General Barr's statement went public, Mr. Trump berated and he nearly fired Barr. But Barr persisted in telling the president that there was no evidence.
We don't
to
want Arnold
support
to be
the
president.
fraud claims.
We do not want that.
this got under my skin, but I also felt it was time for me to say something. So I set up a lunch with the AP reporter.
Also, we don't want Jim Carrey either.
And
I don't
told him
anyway.
at
I
lunch,
can't say for you.
made the statement.
Jim Carrey's an anti-vaxxer.
That to date
He's
we have
backpedaled
not
on some of
seen
it, but
fraud
not
on
all
a
of it.
scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election. I had a later
Is the
meeting scheduled at the White House at
is the
3
volume
o'clock
still bad,
with
or is it better?
Meadows. This was previously scheduled, so I knew this was going to come up, and I went over there and I told my secretary that I thought I would probably be fired and told not to go home. I mean, not to go back to my office. So I said, you might have to pack up for me. And so when I got over there, I met with the chief of staff. He said the president was angry. He didn't really get into the issue of the fraud. And then I went up to Pat Cipolloni's office and we were talking with each other. And word came down that he wanted us both to go to the Oval. And the president was as mad as I've ever seen him, and he was trying to control himself. And the president said, well, this is killing me. You didn't have to say this. You must have said this because you hate Trump. You hate Trump. And then he raised...
He has walked back on a little bit of it. Did you know that he spends a lot of time in like a culty place in Iowa show doing yoga and talking about nature?
And I explained to him that at that point I knew the exact number of precincts in Detroit. I think it was 630 something. I said,
yeah,
Mr. President,
he loves Iowa. He talks about it on
elsewhere in the state,
on Twitter a lot.
They centralized the counting process, so they're not counted in each precinct. They're moved to counting stations, and so the normal process would.
I'm always like, someday that's going to make my Christmas. I'm going to run into Jim Carrey and I'm going to tell him out my butt how much I like him.
People complaining about it point out to you,
and then beg him not to run for president.
You did last time. I mean, there's no indication of fraud in Detroit, and.
Honestly, y'all, we need Ilhan Omar to be our next president, or AOC.
Bullshit. I mean, that the claims of fraud.
That's what we need.
And he was indignant about that.
Weird Al used to be vegan, but came back to the light side. He stopped being a vegan?
That they'd wasted a whole month on these claims on the Dominion voting machines, and they were idiotic claims. And I specifically raised the Dominion voting machines, which I found to be among the most disturbing.
Would you get a picture? I always tell myself if I run into famous people, I don't want a picture. I just want to keep it up in the brain box. It depends on the way it felt. Like, I might not even approach if it looks like they're just having a rough time or whatever, you know what I mean?
That there was this systemic corruption in the system and that their votes didn't count and that these machines controlled by somebody else were actually determining it, which was complete nonsense.
All right, we can crochet now, y'all.
And it was being laid out there, and I told them that it was crazy stuff, and they were wasting their time on that. And it was doing a grave disservice to the country.
Okay, so the very next day, the president released a video rehashing some of the very same claims that his chief law enforcement officer had told him were, quote, nonsense.
Here's an example. This is Michigan. At 6:31 in the morning,
what was
a vote dump of 149,772 votes came in unexpectedly. We were winning by a lot. That batch was received in horror. We have a company that's very suspect. Its name is Dominion. With the turn of a dial or the change of a chip, you can press a button for Trump and the vote goes to Biden. What kind of a system is this?
Barr again told the president that there was nothing to these claims on December 14th.
When I walked in, sat down, he went off on
fixed the saturation so that you could see the individual stitches better. I should probably
involving fraud.
Give me a second here.
Through the Dominion machines. and a report had been prepared by a very reputable cybersecurity firm, which he identified as Allied Security Operations Group, and he held up the report, and then he asked that a copy of it be made for me. And while a copy was being made, he said, this is absolute proof that the Dominion machines were rigged. The report means that I'm going to have a second term. And then he gave me a copy of the report. And as he talked more and more about it, I sat there flipping through the report and looking through it.
Okay, let me know if this needs...
To be frank,
why did
it
that
looked very
happen?
Amateurish to me. Didn't have the credentials of the people
I'm so
involved,
sorry,
but
everybody.
I didn't see any real
Why did that happen?
qualifications. And the statements were made very conclusory, like, these machines were designed to, engage in fraud or something to that effect, but I didn't see any supporting information for it. And I was somewhat demoralized because I thought, boy, if he really believes this stuff, he has, lost contact with he's become detached from reality.
Okay.
If he really believes this stuff. On the other hand, when
All
I went
right,
into
sorry about that. I don't know why that happened. I'm
would,
so sorry.
Tell him how crazy some of these allegations were. There was never an indication of interest in what the actual facts were. In my opinion then, and my opinion now, is that the election was not stolen by fraud. And I haven't seen anything since the election that changes my mind on that, including the 2000 Mules movie.
Familiar with the 2000.
Well, maybe you can assess that 2,000 mules, and people are talking about that.
Well, I mean, just in a nutshell, I just think the GBI was unimpressed with it, and I was similarly unimpressed with it because I think I was holding my fire on that to see what the photographic evidence was, because I thought, well, hell, if they have a lot of photographs of the same person dumping a lot of ballots in different boxes, that's hard to explain. So I wanted to see what the photographic evidence was, but the cell phone data is singularly unimpressive. I mean, it basically, if you take 2 million cell phones and figure out where they are physically in a big city like Atlanta or wherever, just by definition, you're going to find many hundreds of them have passed by and spent time in the vicinity of these boxes. And the premise that
it's for votes. It needs to sound serious.
Boxes or whatever it was, that's a mule is just indefensible. It by definition, you're going to have hundreds of this. I mean, I saw one contractor said, we figured out that our truck alone would account for 6 cell phone signals. This was some kind of contractor, and our route would take us by these things on a regular basis. So but then when the movie came out, I think the photographic evidence in it was completely I mean, there was a little bit of it, but it was lacking. It didn't establish widespread illegal harvesting. The other thing is people don't understand is that
I don't think anybody believed it.
It's not
Bardic
clear
News. I don't
that
think
even
that
if you can
anybody
show
believed it,
harvesting,
not even
that
Trump. I
changes
think that he
the
just
results of the
was
election.
speaking
The courts are not
as
gonna
if it
throw
was
out
real,
votes,
because that's a business tactic,
and then figure
right?
out
It's a
what
shitty
votes were
business
harvested
tactic
and throw
too.
them out.
I don't
You'd
know
still
why
have
he would
burden
ever
on
try
the
to bring
challenging
shitty
party to show that
business
illegal
tactics
votes were cast. Votes were
to
the result
politics.
of undue influence.
He
or
knows good
bribes,
ones.
or
He
it
knows
was
good
really,
business
the person was
practices. I don't know, man.
But absent that evidence, I just didn't see courts throwing out votes anyway. I felt that before the election, it was possible to talk sense to the president. And while you sometimes had to engage
If you keep
in,
saying the same thing over and over, it will stick.
big
That's
wrestling
why
match with him,
conservatives.
that it was possible to keep things
That's why
on track,
conservatives do
but
what
I
they
was,
do.
felt
That's
that
why.
after the election, he didn't seem to be listening, and I
That's
didn't
why
think it was,
your friends that are conservatives are more
that I was
likely
inclined not
to
to
vote
stay
for a
around
snappy
if he wasn't
one-liner
listening
than
to
peer-reviewed data,
vice
because they say it
premiers or
over and
cabinet
over again, and it
secretaries.
makes it become true to people who
So
don't
on
do
December
research,
14th,
right?
bar quit.
Or only research
Now, the Attorney
people who
General
agree
wasn't
with
the
them,
only
like
person
Stephen
who told the
Crowder or
president
Ben
that his
Shapiro or
claims were
whatever.
false. Other officials and close advisors told him the same
It's
thing.
dangerous. Look after your
Rather
family.
than try to address a counterfactual or a hypothetical, let me just say there were instances where the president would say, people are telling me this, or I've heard this, or I saw on television, you know, this impropriety in Atlanta.
None of his underlings stuck around for 4 years other than his family. He was firing people left and right for talking out about him doing illegal stuff.
You're getting bad information, that's not correct.
1, 2, 3, 4,
It's
5,
demonstrated to be
7,
incorrect from our point of view. It's been debunked.
A month and a half or so after the election day, and at that meeting, various allegations of fraud were discussed, and
they were all simple coffee
Eric and Pat didn't, told the group, the president included,
expected
that,
to commit
none of those allegations had been substantiated
coffee
to the point
fee,
where they
if
could
you
be the basis for any litigation challenge to the election.
I think I spent a solid year
President Trump's
opening
own
stream
vice
with coffee
president
feed
and
chat
his
after
top
that.
advisors also
I'm pretty
knew
sure
that there
we
wasn't
called it
evidence
that for
to
like
support
a
the
year.
claims that the president was making.
Anyone else other than Mr. Meadows who asked you about the status outside of your legal group, Mr. Morgan and the others you mentioned? Anyone else who asked you the status of what you were finding and your assessment of it?
Yes, sir.
Who's that?
Peter Navarro.
When did you talk to Mr. Navarro?
Oz, that makes me sad.
Around the same time as...
There's so much you
Mr.
can do
Meadows?
to affect change.
Yes, sir.
And it's
tell me about
important
that
now more than ever.
Um,
We're in a position right now where
I recall him
either
asking me
politicians are
questions
going to
about
be able to get away with whatever the fuck they want,
Dominion
or somebody's going to be
and
facing some
maybe some other
accountability
categories
because of the absolutely treasonous things
allegations
that.
of voter
I'll tell
fraud.
you this much for free. If this
And I
had
remember telling him
happened
that
200 years ago, Donald Trump would already
I
be
didn't
hung
believe
dead.
the Dominion
100% for
because I
treason.
thought the hand recount in
100%.
Georgia
Either that or it would have been covered up and we wouldn't have
resolve
known
any
anything
issues
about
with
it.
a technology problem
And this country
with
would be in
Dominion or
much
Dominion
worse
flipping
position
votes.
today.
And I mentioned at that time that the CISA, Chris Krebs, had
Like
recently released
literally
a
this
report
dude committed
saying that the
treason
election was secure.
and sedition.
And I believe Mr. Navarro accused me of being an agent of the deep state working with Chris Krebs against the president.
That's absolutely
And I never
true,
took another phone call from Mr. Navarro.
Anyone else besides Mr. Meadows, Mr. Navarro, Mr. Hirschman that you had discussions with inquiring about what you were finding in your
2 wins in Fortnite today? Nice.
review of the allegations that were pouring in?
I believe I had about a 15-second conversation with the vice president about it as well.
Army Shardies, what an amazing name! You don't understand
visits
how
to the White
much
House,
your
I
handle
don't know which
reflects
one.
my
I
channel.
think
I'm
it was the
obsessed with
first one in
pirates. My
November.
license plate says
I
ahoy
had met him
M8E.
briefly at the
For what it's
campaign,
worth, I'm obsessed with
and he
pirates.
remembered me
Obsessed
and
with
saw
I have
me.
an anchor tattoo.
And
You have no idea.
asked
and
what I was doing
Army Hardies,
on the
fucking,
campaign, and
you
I
gotta
told
see
him
our
that,
titular
we were
emote.
looking into
Our titular emote? That's not what it
some
is.
of the
Our
issues
iconic
related to voter
emote. I
fraud.
apologize.
And he asked me, I don't remember his exact words, but
So
he asked
funny.
me if
Like you fit here.
we were
You
finding
fit
anything.
here. It's crazy.
And I said that I didn't believe we were
I
finding it,
didn't
or
see
I
the
was
trailer.
not
I'm gonna
personally
watch it
finding
later though.
anything,
I'm excited.
sufficient to
I love
alter
Sea of
the
Thieves.
results of the election.
Do I have
And
a favorite
he thanked me.
pirate movie?
That was our
I
interaction.
am living for
At a
the
later
new Taika
hearing,
Waititi.
You'll hear live testimony from the former acting
Oh my
Deputy
God, what's it
Attorney
called?
General of the Department of Justice.
I love it
Rich
so much.
Donahue. But now I'd like to play a portion of his testimony.
Oh my God, what is it called? Our
I'd
flag
like
means
to
death.
again, put this in
It's a show,
perspective and
but
try to
that's
put it
okay.
in very clear
Hi,
terms to the
Eric.
president.
How are you? Thank you for the
And
10
I said
subs
something
earlier.
to
That
the
was
effect
very
of,
nice
Sir,
of
we've
you.
done dozens of investigations, hundreds of interviews.
Oh, what am I
The
doing?
major allegations are not supported by the evidence developed. We've looked at Georgia,
The
Pennsylvania,
wrong
Michigan,
thing.
Nevada.
That's what I'm doing.
We're doing our job. Much of the info you're getting is false. And then I went into, for instance, this thing from Michigan, this report about 68% error rate. Reality is it was only 0.0063% error rate, less than 1 in 15,000.
Yeah, Army Shardies, you found your home.
So the president accepted that. He said, okay, fine, but what about the others? And
See you
again,
later,
this gets back to
Dragon
the point that there were so many of these allegations that when you gave him a very direct answer on one of them,
Oh, I'm a huge Taika stan in a big way. I've always loved What We Do in the Shadows. What We Do in the Shadows, the movie, is like my favorite comedy. My boy.
And this claim was by a truck driver who believed, perhaps honestly, that he had transported an entire tractor-trailer truck full of ballots from New York.
Jojo Rabbit was
to Pennsylvania.
insanely good.
And this was, again, out there in the public and discussed. And I essentially said, look, we looked at that allegation. We looked at both ends, both the people who load the truck and the people who unload the truck. And that allegation was not supported by the evidence. Again, he said, okay. And then
Well,
he said,
sorry to
"No,
bring the
I
mood
didn't
down,
mention that one.
Shardies.
What about the others?" And I said, okay, well, with regard to Georgia, we looked at the tape. We interviewed
How much room is there to
There is
fudge
no
the
suitcase.
numbers?
The president kept fixating on this suitcase that supposedly had fraudulent ballots, and that the suitcase was rolled out from under the table. And I said, no, sir, there is no suitcase. You can watch that video over and over. There is no suitcase. There is a
Oh God, I
bin
love What We Do in
where
the
they
Shadows
carry
so
the
much, and
ballots.
the show is
And that's just how they
amazing
move
too.
ballots
That
around
lady,
facility. There's nothing suspicious about that at all.
I kind of want her to beat me up.
I told him that there was no multiple scanning of the ballots.
I don't know what kind of
When
crush
they
this is,
reported
but I
allegations
kind of
that
want
they
her to
were
beat
taking
me up.
one ballot and
See you
scanning
later,
it
Joe. It
through
was
3
really
or
good to
4 or
see
5
you.
times to rack up votes, presumably for Vice President Biden. I told him that the video did not support that. Then he went off on double voting at the top of the next page. He said, dead people are voting. Indians are getting paid to vote. He meant people on Native American reservations. He said there's lots of fraud going on here. Told him flat out that much of the information he's getting is false and or just not supported by the evidence. We look at the allegations, but they don't pan out.
Mr. Barr and his advisors were not the only ones who determined that the president's allegations regarding Dominion voting machines were false. So, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to include in the record of this hearing reports issued by the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, otherwise known as CISA, that addressed and rejected the claims of manipulation of voting machines in the 2020 election.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also ask unanimous consent to include in the record a report prepared by the Michigan Senate Oversight Committee that disproved claims of election fraud in Michigan, as well as a statement by 59 of the country's leading election security scientists, noting the absence of any credible evidence that the 2020 election had been altered through technical compromise, and 5 other reports from organizations and individuals confirming there was no widespread fraud in the 2020 election or describing the spread of the former president's lies.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Pursuant to the order of the committee for today, the chair declares the committee in recess for a period of approximately 10 minutes.
Sick. I gotta poop. BRB, y'all.
And we'll take that as the 10 minutes we have to kind of walk you through a little bit what we've seen and what it means in the larger picture here. The star witness today was supposed to be President Trump's then campaign manager, Bill Stepien. His wife, however, is in labor, so instead the committee played clips of his previously taped depositions. In those clips, Stepien said that he clearly told President Trump before the election that it could take a long time for election results to be finalized, and that despite his advice, President Trump went out on election night to declare he had won. The committee also played clips of other Trump advisors saying that there was no substantial election fraud, including multiple clips from former Attorney General Bill Barr, dismantling most of the president's arguments about fraud and stating that he told the president they were unfounded, even, quote, crazy in real time, even saying he feared the president was, quote, detached from reality if he believed this stuff. Let me bring in my colleagues, NBC News Chief White House Correspondent Kristen Welker and NBC News Senior Washington Correspondent Hallie Jackson. Great to have you both here. Hallie, let me start with you.
Sure.
We've been promised new information, things we haven't seen before. Did you get a sense that the needle was moved here?
So I think so, in the sense of the people closest to Donald Trump, the people closest to the campaign, the people literally counting the votes, maybe not literally, but watching the data come in, were telling him not only you can't call it yet on election night, not only advising him, wait, do not go out there and say we won the election, because we did not. The former president did just that. But also saying this election fraud stuff that Rudy Giuliani is telling you about is not accurate. We don't know that that is true, and we would advise you not to say that. Even his own son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was one of the voices there. And I think big picture, what the committee has tried to lay out here is that former President Trump, on election night and in the weeks following that, took the advice of, they talked about, this was a bit of a moment, and apparently inebriated Rudy Giuliani. Of course, a name that I think a lot of people know. Not saying that, I don't think, to be salacious, but to try to point out that this is somebody who took the advice of somebody who was apparently inebriated on election night, right, to try to paint the picture of what Giuliani was doing, ignoring the people who were closest to him and that had been working on his campaign this whole time. So in that sense, yes, we hadn't heard from Bill Stepien and Jason Miller on the record that they were telling the then president, don't go out there and declare victory yet. That is a new piece of information. Alex Cannon, again, a former Trump campaign aide whose name is probably not familiar to most people, saying, I talked to so many people, Mark Meadows, Mike Pence, Peter Navarro, and told them these claims are not true as it relates to election fraud. So I do think that the needle moved.
Kristen, let me ask you about this. Something I'll let people into our conversation earlier, and that has to do with they're inching closer, but haven't really answered the question, does President Trump at any point believe what he's being told? Does he acknowledge, yes, okay, I get it, I didn't win?
That was the one missing link. What the committee started to lay out today was that there was an avalanche, all of these voices in his inner circle saying that you did not win this election. There was no fraud. Again, as Hallie's saying, starting on election night, saying do not declare victory. And yet at the top, Representative Lofgren said that Mr. Trump knew it, that he had lost the election. We have yet to hear that from former President Trump himself or to see any proof of that. Now, again, this is about the avalanche, I think, the number of officials around him who were essentially singing from the same exact songbook. I just heard from a former Trump official who said that today's testimony was absolutely damning. It shows Trump as a man isolated from senior staff, believing conspiracies, most everyone around him who knew to be ludicrous. And I think that's the takeaway that the committee wants. But again, that direct link to the former president, I think that remains to be a question.
And once again, they have relied on the testimony of individuals who were close and largely supportive of the president. These are not, enemies of Donald Trump.
Absolutely. I think it's significant to hear from his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to hear from his daughter, Ivanka, to hear Jared Kushner say, I told him that I didn't trust Rudy Giuliani. Hallie and I covered his administration. We know that those are the people he listened to closest.
And the thing is, this had been broadly reported in broad strokes, right, after the election. And it's not as though the broad themes that we're talking about here are unknown to people. What is new is seeing these people, in their own words, on the record, on television like this, make these declarations so clearly. Kristen makes a good point that so far they have not shown proof that former President Trump acknowledged the way that, for example, Alex Cannon testified, Mark Meadows did, that there's no there as it relates to election fraud. In fact, the opposite, from what we heard from the former Attorney General, Lester, that you referenced as we were coming into this break here, that the former Attorney General thought that Donald Trump was detached from reality, that he had become detached from reality because so many people around him had been saying this isn't true. He heard it. The question is, and I think this is where the committee is going here, he clearly internalized something very different from the Sidney Powells, the Rudy Giulianis, and that sort of wing of his advisory committee, if you will.
Let me turn to Garrett Haake now, back outside the hearing room. Garrett, we're in this 10-minute break. They'll resume with a second panel. Can you give me your thoughts on what we've heard so far and where this goes today?
Well, Lester, the committee went to great pains, obviously, here to describe the Trump campaign team's divorce, basically, from election night on between what Bill Stepien on tape described as Team Normal and the Rudy Giuliani-based team of folks who were pushing the election lies and the various myths and sort of conspiracy theories about what had happened on that night. I was taken by one comment on tape from one of the advisors describing how Team Normal viewed those conspiracy theories. Let's play it now.
What they were proposing, I thought was nuts. And the theory was also completely nuts, right? I mean, there's a combination of Italians, Germans. I mean, different things have been floating around as to who was involved. I remember Hugo Chavez and the Venezuelan. She has an affidavit from somebody who says they wrote a software in, it's something with the Philippines, and just all over the radar.
Hearing those conspiracy theories laid out by the paid advisors, the paid campaign officials, I think is telling. And one other thing that I think is really noteworthy as we think about these hearings more broadly, the testimony of Bill Barr, now 2 hearings in a row, has been really key. I think Barr even more the starring player in this first hour than Bill Stepien is or would have been. Barr only spoke to this committee on June 2nd. This is very late arriving testimony in the scope of this investigation, and only met with the committee for a few hours, whereas others met for hours upon hours. Barr came in, it appears, and delivered this very damning testimony late in the game that has shifted the course, I think, quite clearly, at least of the public presentation here. When we resume from this break, we're going to hear a lot more about the state-based efforts here with witnesses specifically focused on claims of fraud in Georgia and in Pennsylvania. And we'll also hear from the preeminent Republican election lawyer, Ben Ginsberg, who is the person who knows the most about how to challenge election results on a legal basis. So I think you'll hear him describe what you could perceive to be the right way to challenge election results if you think they are fraudulent, and you'll see that contrasted with everything we just heard from this first panel of witnesses.
Okay, Garrett, thank you. Yamiche Alcindor is our NBC News Washington correspondent. Let me pick up on something that Garrett was talking about there. He made a reference to Team Normal. We're watching as these videos are played of these interviews, people who are part of the inner circle essentially peeling away.
Certainly, Lester. What we saw from the committee was really a detailing of the shrinking inner circle of the Trump campaign and of former President Trump's own administration. What we saw was really President Trump at the beginning in a room full of people who were saying, okay, we really want you to try to win this election. That, of course, being Bill Stepien saying, I was there with him on election night. I wanted us to win. And then you heard him say, after a while, the things that were happening when it was clear that President Trump had not won the election were not honest or professional, and as a result, he had to step away. Attorney General Bill Barr, former, also had that same sentiment when he said before the election, you might have to spar with former President Trump, but he could still listen to you after the election. He was a man that was not listening to anybody close to him, not listening to his aides. Jared Kushner being another one, of course, a close family member of former President Trump, saying that he told President Trump directly, this is not the approach that I would take. And the president saying, in fact, I have confidence in Rudy Giuliani, who, of course, was described a number of times as giving drunken advice to President Trump there. So what you hear really is a cracking of the black box at the White House. We knew a lot of these details, but the fact that you hear people saying, I was with him, I was in the trenches with former President Trump, and then I lost confidence because things started to go, quote, nuts. That, to me, is really striking. I should also tell you, I've been emailing with some former Trump aides as well as ethic lawyers who say that this part of the hearing has been gold because it really does show that there was a conscious effort and a conscious decision on the part of President Trump to lie.
I do think it's worth remembering and noting here that despite the pushback we are seeing now, as Yamiche described it, inside the black box and the cracking of that, None of this was not made public in the days before January 6th by these people who are now coming out. Some of them, of course, under threat of subpoena, if you will, right? List some legal muscle.
All right, I'm
behind that.
back.
But this was
Sorry.
not as though there was.
I've been having a lot of
in the days before
problems. I have
January
to
6th.
drink a
Lester
bunch
and
of
Kristen, as you
water.
both well
I'm going to
know,
start
of
fasting
these
on Mondays,
high-level,
Wednesdays, and Fridays.
high-ranking officials in the White House,
And I think
opposed to
that
former
will
President
help
Trump
me
coming
out a
and
whole
saying,
lot.
no, he's wrong.
Yeah, and I think
gonna
that
drink
is what makes
water
it
on
so
those
striking.
days.
And remember where we started this day, the revelation that Bill Stepien was
And then eat a
supposed to appear in
fuckload.
person, did not appear.
on
and the
on
question mark
Tuesdays,
around
Thursdays,
that,
and weekends.
Would the taped testimony be as compelling? And in speaking to Republicans who have been watching this hearing, they say actually it was quite compelling because clearly the committee chose the sound bites that they thought were strongest. Let them play out. It was a real wild card going into today. And the fact that they got to choose what was said and what we heard from Stepien was significant. And there was a lot that we heard from Bill
Stepien's demeanor
Stepien.
did not seem as if he was appearing as a hostile witness.
He was not, and I think that's a really important point. And he made it very clear that starting on election night, he broke with his former boss. He said, don't go out there and declare victory.
A long way to go,
maybe,
though, from what we've
Will,
heard today
maybe.
to get us
I'm
back to
right now
January
still
6th.
trying to
Absolutely.
collect
where the president's
my
finger
own
strips,
spoons.
fingerprints may
That
or may not lie.
sounds
And that's the
fun.
question
Like,
mark.
please
Will the
don't
committee
think
be
that I
able
don't
to do
want
that
to
at
do
the
it.
end
It's
of the
about whether or
7
not I
hearings
can do
that they're
it.
going
I
to
feel
hold?
like I have
thought
no
that
time
Steyerwalt was
for
significant, the former
myself.
Fox News political director, who of course was on the
Which
team
is
of people
just
who called
untrue.
Arizona, Fox
It's
becoming
just
the
that I
first
need
network to do
something.
so. Essentially,
I just
a
don't know
message
what yet.
to those
You know what I
who
mean?
are skeptical, to those who believe the big lie, saying we really believed in that Arizona call.
So drinking 200 ounces a day. I'm not quite dieting, but I'm cutting out and detoxing from poisons like alcohol or any sort of substances like greenery. I still have my CBD oil going, but no THC.
U.S. attorney based in
Speaking of
Atlanta,
which,
who
give me
resigned
some of that.
rather abruptly, and reportedly it was because of the pressure. Right, this pressure campaign, as we know, happened in Georgia, and we're going to hear from the Secretary of State there, Brad Raffensperger, in a later hearing. But talking about this pressure, as you heard laid out in sort of part one of the hearing, the former president kept bringing up these instances of what about election fraud here? What about this instance? What about this rumor? What about this piece of speculation? BJ Pak is one of the people who had apparently pushed back on that. I think we're going to hear more about that too. Al Schmidt in Pennsylvania, right in the Philly area. Another place that the former president was focused on as far as Pennsylvania, critical state, as far as there being instances of election fraud. And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised to hear about the way, and I've talked with secretaries of state, I've talked with elections officials in other states who have talked about how they felt physically uncomfortable because of the threats against them, because of the rhetoric and the language that was
Let me
used.
bring in Danny Samalas now, our legal analyst. Danny,
Physical
I want
threats,
to go back to
eh?
this issue. It was raised of the fundraising, that there was fundraising
I might
on
have
the
missed it, but
back
why
of
did you
this
quit? My
big
tolerance is
lie.
way too high, and I was
I think it
smoking
was
and spending
called
too much. Just
Big
need to
Lie,
clear
the
my mind
Big
a bit.
Ripoff.
I
I
just
think is
hate
how it was
being high
characterized
all the
in that
fucking
presentation.
time.
Is that an area
But I really
that
like
stands out to
smoking,
you that
and I
there
know that
may be
CBD
some
oil is like.
criminal exposure by
I was having
someone?
less
Yes, we haven't
anxiety
heard
when I was
much about it
smoking a
today,
lot.
only a few snippets, but it
And
may
I think
end
it was
up
from the
being
cannabidol.
critical
This
when the
was
smoke clears
a
from these
resounding
hearings, because
success
if it's
of
true
a
that there was fundraising going on, and that
of an
fundraising was based on a fraud or a
essentially.
fraudulent communication.
If they knew that was fraudulent.
And that's the key to fraud.
Also, I'm
And by
just
the way,
trying to
that's the
get
key
like my
everything we've
hunger
been
and
seeing
stuff in
today. It
check.
boils
My
down to
body
two words,
very
important in the
much
law:
wants me
willful
to
blindness.
gain weight right
We
now.
may-
Like
that's
all
the
I want
sticking
is
your
to
head in the
eat
sand
and
like the
eat and
proverbial
eat
ostrich
and
and ignoring
sleep.
that which is right in front of
and
your
I
face.
think that if I
and the reason that's
fast,
so
that'll
important
help
is that
that.
we may never really be able to prove what Donald Trump knew in his heart of hearts, but we may be able to show what he ignored and what was right in front of him.
All right, the session has been gavelled in. Let's return to
Joined
Washington.
today by BJ Pak, Al Schmidt, and Ben Ginsberg. Mr. Pak is the former United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. Mr. Schmidt is a former city commissioner for the city of Philadelphia, where he served for more than 10 years. Mr. Ginsberg is one of the leading election law attorneys in the country and has represented Republican presidential candidates in election litigation dating back to 2000, where he represented George W. Bush in the Bush v. Gore litigation. I will now swear in our witnesses. Please stand and raise your right hand.
That's
Do you
awesome,
swear or
Logan.
affirm under penalty
Congratulations.
of perjury that the
What are my
testimony you're about to
pronouns?
give
I'm she,
is
her
the
is
truth,
fine.
the whole
I'm
truth,
never
and
going to be
nothing but the
offended
truth?
by a they,
So help
them.
you God.
I'm never going to be offended by any of them, but I definitely am like a cis person.
Let the record reflect the witnesses answered in the affirmative.
Especially when done in public with an escape route.
Pursuant to Section 5C8
Shardies, I will definitely remember that you're...
I now recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before the break, I think you all heard Mr. Barr and Mr. Donahue talk about the false claims that Mr. Trump and his supporters made about suitcases of fake ballots in Georgia.
Hi, babe.
We have a witness
Love
here
you.
today who thoroughly investigated that issue. Mr. Pack, I want to thank you for appearing before us today. You were appointed by President Trump to serve as a U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia, and you served from 2017 until January of 2021. You were the lead federal prosecutor there and worked for the Department of Justice under then Attorney General Bill Barr. Now, were you ever asked by Attorney General Barr to investigate claims of voter fraud in the 2020 election? And if so, what were those claims?
Thank you, Congressman Lofgren. Thank you for the question. Approximately December 4th, I believe, of 2020, Attorney General Barr and I had a conversation about an unrelated case to the case at issue.
Working
at the
for
end of the
myself
conversation,
either.
Mr.
I really want
Barr
to.
had asked me if I had seen a certain videotape that was being
But the
reported in the
instructions
news,
aren't very clear on it.
where Mr. Giuliani, in a Senate subcommittee hearing that was held the day before, May 3rd, showed a videotape of a purportedly a security tape at the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, which is also in Fulton County, in the city of Atlanta. I'm sorry, city of, yes. At the time, Mr. Barr asked me that he had made a public statement that he had not seen any widespread election fraud that would question the outcome of the election. And because of the videotape and the serious allegation that Mr. Giuliani was making with respect to the suitcase full of ballots purported in the video, he asked me to find out what I could about it, because he had envisioned that in some days after our call that he was going to go to the White House for a meeting, and then that issue might come up. He asked me to make it a priority to get to the bottom of, to try to substantiate the allegation made by Mr. Giuliani.
Thank you. I understand the Georgia Secretary of State's office
Giuliani is
investigated
such a clown, dude.
those State Farm Arena allegations and didn't find any evidence of fraud. What did you find when your office conducted its own investigation?
We found that the suitcase full of ballots, the alleged black suitcase that was being seen pulled from under the table, was actually an official lockbox where ballots were kept safe. We found out that there was a mistake in terms of a misunderstanding that they were done counting ballots or tallying ballots for the night, and the partisan watchers that was assigned by each of the respective parties were announced to send home. But once they realized the mistake, someone from the Secretary of State's office had indicated that, no, we're not done for the night. You need to go ahead and continue counting. So once they packed up the lockbox full of ballots, they brought back the official ballot box again and continue to tally the ballots from the lockbox. Unfortunately, during the Senate hearing, Mr. Giuliani only played a clip that showed them pulling out the official ballot box from under the table and referring to that as a smoking gun of a fraud in Fulton County. But in actuality, in review of the entire video, it showed that that was actually an official ballot box that was kept underneath the tables. And then we saw them pack up because of the announcement that they thought they were done for the night. And then once the announcement was made that you should continue counting, they brought the ballot box back out and they continued to count. We interviewed, the FBI interviewed the individuals that are depicted in the videos.
Busy, babe?
That purportedly were double, triple counting of the ballots, and determined that
thank
nothing
you.
irregular
Wait.
happened in the
My coffee mug is
and
up here.
The allegations made by Mr. Giuliani
Sorry.
were
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I'd like to play again a testimony from Mr. Donahue, who appeared before the committee before today.
Mr. Donahue, we talked at some length about whether or not the White House or the president was informed about the Antrim report. On the results of the investigations, the interviews that had gone on Fulton County, how would those results have been communicated to the White House, to the president?
I don't know how they were initially communicated. I do know that they came up in subsequent conversations with the president, and Dag Rose and I essentially told him we looked into that, and it's just not true.
Okay, so he was informed.
I told the president myself that several times in several conversations, that these allegations about ballots being smuggled in.
If he doesn't get prosecuted,
and
like what
machines several times,
are we even
it was
doing?
not true. That we looked at the video.
Hi, Seth the Duck. How are you? Thank you so much
Mr.
for
Pack,
doing
after you left the U.S. Attorney's
groundwork
Office
for our
on
buds.
January 4th, 2021,
I love that. I love that, and I love
did the
you.
next U.S.
Thank
attorney
you.
there, I think Mr. Trump's personal pick, Bobby Christine, did he investigate any remaining claims of fraud? And if so, did he find any evidence that supported the president's claims of voter fraud?
It is my understanding that Mr. Christine continued any investigations that were pending at the time of my departure, but he was unable to find any evidence of fraud that affected the outcome of the election.
So after investigating the president's and Mr. Giuliani's claims about voter fraud in Georgia, is it your view today that there was no evidence of widespread fraud sufficient to undermine confidence in the outcome of the election in Georgia?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Pack. And I want to thank you also for the service that you've given to our country. We appreciate that. Next, I'd like to turn to President Trump's false allegations about election integrity in Philadelphia. The Attorney General discussed these allegations at some length.
I'm having a hard time keeping count today.
The president has repeatedly suggested that there was some kind of outpouring of unexpected votes in inner city areas like Philadelphia as recently as January 13th when
Shardies, I love it in
NPR
theory,
set.
but I don't think it would ever be
He was
taken
asked
seriously.
by
I think it would be the first thing canceled
interviewer,
every week.
What's your
I
evidence
don't
of
know.
fraud? And he said more people
I just
voted
don't
in
think that
Philadelphia than
boomers
there were
take young
voters.
people
And
seriously
that
enough
was
at
absolute
all.
Rubbish. The turnout in Philadelphia was in line with the state's turnout, and in fact, it was not as
A bummer because
as
these
impressive
Zoomers
as
are on
many,
some real shit.
suburban counties.
Zoomers are
And,
smarter than any generation
there was
before them.
nothing,
That like I'm a
strange about the
Zoomer
Philadelphia,
stan in a big
turnout.
way.
It wasn't like there was all these
They give me
unexpected
so much
votes that
fucking
came
hope
out
for the
in
future.
Philadelphia. So, I think once you actually look at the votes and then there's an obvious explanation. For example, in Pennsylvania, Trump ran weaker than the Republican ticket generally. He ran weaker than two of the state candidates. He ran weaker than the congressional
If I became dictator for a day, lowering
delegation
voting age would be
running
my
for
first
federal
act. Yeah, I
Congress,
feel like
and he
people should
ran
be able to
weaker
vote
than
at
the
15.
I think
at 15,
looked
you'll
at
be
this
learning
recently,
about it
but
in
he
school.
generally was
You'll be like talking about who the
weak
presidential
element on the
candidates
Republican
are.
ticket, so that does
You
not
should be. It
suggest
should be
that the
part of high
election
school
was
to be
stolen
voting
by
in your
fraud.
local elections.
Pennsylvania and Bill
It's
McSwain, we were
crazy.
talking with the US
Like I
Attorney
don't understand why voting
Philadelphia
isn't
about an alleged
mandatory,
discrepancy
and there
between the
isn't
number of
just
absentee
like
ballots issued and the number of ballots
much more
cast.
accessibility
That was one
for
of
that
the big
kind of
ones
stuff.
for a
It
period of
blows
time.
my mind.
I think that was raised at Gettysburg by Giuliani or something like that, but it kept on being repeated, and I found it annoying because it didn't seem that it was right. So I called McSwain, and he got back to me. He said, no, the problem is that Mastriano threw out this number, and what he did was he mixed apples and oranges. He took the number of applications for the Republican primary and he compared it to the number of absentee votes cast in the general election. But once you actually go and look and compare apples to apples, there's no discrepancy at all. And that's one of the I think at some point I covered that with the president.
We have another witness here today who has detailed knowledge about the election process in Philadelphia. Mr. Schmidt, at the time of the 2020 presidential election, you were serving as the only Republican member of Philadelphia's three-member city commission, which is responsible for overseeing elections throughout the city. Is that correct?
That's correct, Congressperson.
So President Trump made numerous claims regarding fraudulent voting practices.
Yeah, I would put an age limit on fucking
including the
Congress.
claim that dead people were voting.
100%.
In fact, Mr. Giuliani
Anybody
told
over
Pennsylvania
like
state
60
legislators
is out of there.
that 8,000 dead people voted in Pennsylvania. You investigated those claims of voter fraud. Can you tell us
Even
what
if
you
it
found?
means sacrificing
Not only
Bernie.
was there not evidence of 8,000 dead voters voting
But people
in
who
Pennsylvania, there wasn't
need
evidence
to
of
answer to the future they're
We
creating
took seriously
need
every
to be the
case
ones
that
that are
was
making
referred to us,
legislation.
no matter how fantastical, no matter how absurd, and took every one of those
65 is
seriously,
more
including
fair.
these.
You're right.
As it turns out, even Mr. Trump's campaign lawyers knew that the dead voter claims weren't valid.
I guess the crooks in Philadelphia are disappointed in this. They only submitted 8,021 ballots from dead people, mail-in ballots for dead people. It's probably easier for dead people to submit mail-in ballots than it is to vote in person.
Rudy was at this stage of his life and the same ability to manage things at this level or not. And obviously, I think Bernie Kerik publicly said it. They never proved the allegations that they were making, and they were trying to develop.
Yeah, I
Mr.
agree
Schmidt,
gracefully.
on November 11th, 2020, President Trump tweeted about you, saying, and here's a quote, "A guy named Al Schmidt, a Philadelphia commissioner and so-called Republican, or rhino, is being used big time by the fake news media to explain how honest things were with respect to the election in Philadelphia. He refuses to look at a mountain of corruption, dishonesty. We win." As a result of that tweet and the CNN interview you gave where you stated the dead voter claims in Pennsylvania were false, you and your staff were subjected to disturbing threats. Can you tell us about that?
The threats prior to that tweet, and on some level it feels almost silly to talk about a tweet, but we can really see the impact that they have, because prior to that, the threats were pretty general in nature. Corrupt election officials in Philadelphia are going to get what's coming to them. You're what the Second Amendment is for. You're walking into the lion's den, all sorts of things like that. After the president tweeted at me by name, calling me out the way that he did, the threats became much more specific, much more graphic, and included not just me by name, but included members of my family by name, their ages, our address, pictures of our home, just every bit of detail that you could imagine. That was what changed with that tweet.
Behind me are redacted threats that you received, that you provided to the committee. Now, we redacted portions of the text to protect your family. Mr. Schmidt, I think I speak for all of my colleagues when I say we are deeply sorry for what you and your loved ones have been through. And I also want to thank you for your service to your country and for standing up for the rule of law.
That's so scary.
I want to thank both Mr. Pack and Mr. Schmidt for their service, their testimony, and for standing up for the rule of law. Now, I'd like to turn to another subject. The courts in our country provide a legitimate venue for campaigns to challenge what they view as irregular election practices. Now, courts have the final say on how the law applies to those challenges. We have a renowned legal expert here to address the Trump campaign's activities in court. Mr. Ginsburg, you spent your entire career representing Republicans in election-related litigation. You served as the National Counsel on Republican presidential campaigns in 2000, in 2004, and in 2012. You played a key role in the 2000 Florida recount that led to the Supreme Court's decision in Bush v. Gore. You served as the co-chair of the Presidential Commission on election administration, I think it's fair to say you're the most prominent Republican lawyer who's litigated in the election field. Now, you've analyzed the Trump campaign's litigation pretty carefully. What's the normal process for post-election litigation? How is the Trump campaign's different from the kinds of post-election litigation you've been involved in and know about?
In the normal course of things, any campaign on the night of the election and the days after will do a couple of different things. One is that they'll analyze precinct results to look for abnormalities in the results, and they'll send people to those precincts to ask more questions. Secondly, all campaigns will have poll watchers and poll workers and observers in the polling place. And so campaigns will talk to those people if they saw any irregularities that could cause problems
We're hanging in
the
there.
election.
How are you?
Now, the Trump campaign talked pre-election about having 50,000 poll workers. So presumably, they did have eyes on the ground in all these places. And so in the normal course of things, a campaign will analyze the reports that come in. Trump campaign had a couple of basic problems, however. Number one, the 2020 election was not close. In 2000, that was 537 and close. In this election, the most narrow margin was 10,000 and something in Arizona, and you just don't make up those sorts of numbers in recounts. And when the claims of fraud and irregularities were made, you've heard very compelling testimony from Mr. Stepien, from Matt Morgan, from Alex Cannon about those claims and how they didn't believe them. And so that put the Trump campaign on sort of a process of bringing cases without the actual evidence that you have to have in which the process is designed to bring out.
So are you aware of any instance in which a court found the Trump campaign's fraud claims to be credible?
No, there was never that instance. In all the cases that were brought, and I've looked at the more than 60 that include more than 180 counts. And no, the simple fact is that the Trump campaign did not make its case.
The Select Committee has identified 62 post-election lawsuits filed by the Trump campaign and his allies between November 4th, 2020
Has
and
anybody
January
ever said
6th,
that kids don't change your life?
2021. Those cases
I don't know if
resulted
anybody's
in
ever said that.
61 losses.
I've
and
only ever
a
heard
single
about how
victory,
much
which
kids change
actually
your
didn't
life.
affect the outcome for either candidate.
For better or for worse.
Despite those 61 losses, President Trump and his allies claim that the courts refused to hear them out, and as a result, they never had their day in court. Mr. Ginsburg, what do you say about the claims that Mr. Trump wasn't given an opportunity to provide the evidence they had of voter fraud? Did they have their day in court?
They did have their day in court. About half of those cases that you mentioned were dismissed at the procedural stage for a lack of standing. The proper people didn't bring the case, or there wasn't sufficient evidence and it got dismissed on a motion to dismiss. But in the other, there was discussion of the merits that was contained in the complaints. And in no instance did a court find that the charges of fraud were real. And it's also worth noting that even if the Trump campaign complained that it did not have its day in court, there have been post-election reviews in each of the 6 battleground states that could have made a difference. And those ranged from the somewhat farcical Cyber Ninjas case in Arizona to the Michigan Senate report that was mentioned earlier, the hand recount in Georgia that Mr. Pack addressed. And in each one of those instances, there was no credible evidence of fraud produced by the Trump campaign or his supporters.
Thank you. You know, as Mr. Ginsburg has explained, there are no cases where the Trump campaign was able to convince a court that there was widespread fraud or irregularities in the 2020 election. Over and over, judges appointed by Democrats and Republicans alike directly rebutted this false narrative. They called out the Trump campaign's lack of evidence for its claims, and the judges did that even in cases where they could have simply thrown out the lawsuit without
I don't suppose
writing
anybody
a
has
word.
an iPhone in here and can make a Truth Social and like update us on
You can
what
see
Trump
behind
is
me
tweeting
a few
or
excerpts from the decisions
not
in
tweeting,
these
I guess,
62 cases.
right now.
The Trump campaign's lack of evidence was criticized by judges across the political spectrum. In Pennsylvania, a Trump-appointed judge concluded, quote, "Charges require specific allegations and proof. We have neither here." Another Trump-appointed judge warned that if cases like these succeeded, quote, "Any disappointed loser in a presidential election,
Yeah, don't feel
able to
obligated if you're
hire
not
a team
comfortable
of
with it
clever
by any
lawyers,
means.
could flag
I would
claim
do it. I
deviations from
am a
election
lifelong
results
Android
and cast
user,
doubt
and
on
by
election
lifelong I
results.
mean since
The list
cell
goes on
phones
and on.
became like
Allegations are called, quote, an
beef or whatever.
amalgamation of theories,
Since
conjecture,
androids
and
came to be, I
speculation.
have had an Android.
In another, strained legal arguments without merit, unsupported by evidence, derived from wholly unreliable sources, a fundamental and obvious misreading of the Constitution. The rejection of President Trump's litigation efforts was overwhelming. 22 federal judges appointed by Republican presidents.
Dami
including
Beatles, thank you
10
so much
appointed by
for the
President
follow. I
Trump
appreciate you.
himself, and at least 24 elected or appointed Republican state judges dismissed the president's claims. At least 11 lawyers have been referred for disciplinary proceedings due to bad faith and baseless efforts to
Dolly
undermine the
Mercenary, I'm
outcome of the
good.
2020 presidential election.
I am loving
Rudy
everything about
Giuliani
these.
had his license to practice law
Oh, no.
suspended in New York. And just this week, a newly filed complaint
Sorry
will
about
potentially
that.
make his suspension from practicing law
That's
in D.C.
my normal wake-up alarm
permanent.
for
And
those
as
of you
we've
that
just
were
heard
here
from
for the
perhaps
beginning
the
of
most
stream.
preeminent Republican election lawyer in recent history, the Trump campaign's unprecedented effort to overturn its election laws in court was a deeply damaging abuse of the judicial process. As stated by U.S. District Court Judge David Carter, this was, quote, a coup.
I still think it would be the cutest to do the leftover strips for the
Thank you,
corset
Mr. Chairman.
so
I
that
yield
it
back.
matches.
I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. The members of the Select Committee may have additional questions for today's witnesses, and we ask that you respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. Without objection, members will be permitted 10 business days to submit statements for the record, including opening remarks and additional questions for the witnesses. The second panel of witnesses is now dismissed.
The conservatives didn't like your Truth Social account. Oh no. Wait, is it over? It's not over, is it?
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren,
Okay.
for a closing statement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now that we understand the litigation efforts by President Trump and his allies, I'd like to present additional actions taken by the Trump campaign during this time. President Trump continued to push the stolen election narrative, even though he and his allies knew that their litigation efforts, making the same claim, had failed. Now, it's worth pointing out that litigation generally does not continue past the safe harbor date of December 14th. But the fact that this litigation went on, well, that decision makes more sense when you consider the Trump campaign's fundraising tactics. Because if the litigation had stopped on December 14th, there would have been no
Do
fight to
exclamation
defend
point
the election
pattern in
and
chat,
no clear path
Jolly
to
Mercenary.
continue to raise millions of dollars. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd ask for unanimous consent to include in the record a video presentation describing how President Trump used the lies he told to raise millions of dollars from the American people. These fundraising schemes were also part of the effort to disseminate the false claims of election fraud.
Without objection, so.
My name is Amanda Wick, and I'm Senior Investigative Counsel with the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. Between Election Day and January 6th, the Trump campaign sent millions of fundraising emails to Trump supporters, sometimes as many as 25 a day. The emails claimed the, quote, left-wing mob was undermining the election, implored supporters to, quote, step up to protect the integrity of the election, and encouraged them to, quote, fight back. But as the Select Committee has demonstrated, the Trump campaign knew these claims of voter fraud were false, yet they continued to barrage small-dollar donors with emails, encouraging them to donate to something called
40% of the country is okay with this. 30% of the country supports and believes it.
I don't believe there is actually a fund called the Election Defense Fund.
Is it fair to say that Election Defense Fund was another, I think we called it a marketing tactic? Yes. And tell us about these funds as marketing tactics.
Just a topic matter where money could potentially go to be, how money could potentially be used.
The claims that the election was stolen were so successful, President Trump and his allies raised $250 million, nearly $100 million in the first week after the election. On November 9th, 2020, President Trump created a separate entity called the Save America PAC. Most of the money raised went to this newly created PAC, not to election-related litigation. The Select Committee discovered that the Save America PAC made millions of dollars of contributions to pro-Trump organizations, including $1 million to Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' charitable foundation, $1 million to the America First Policy Institute, a conservative organization which employs several former Trump administration officials, $204,857 to the Trump Hotel Collection, and over $5 million to Event Strategies, Inc., the company that ran President Trump's January 6th rally on the Ellipse.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing.
The evidence developed by the Select Committee highlights how the Trump campaign aggressively pushed false election claims to fundraise, telling supporters it would be used to fight voter fraud that did not exist. The emails continued through January 6th, even as President Trump spoke on the Ellipse. 30 minutes after the last fundraising email was sent, the Capitol was breached.
Every American is entitled and encouraged to participate in our electoral process. Political fundraising is part of that. Small dollar donors use scarce disposable income to support candidates and causes of their choosing, to make their voices heard. And those donors
every
deserve
election
the
I
truth
do,
about
I
what
really
those
should
funds
stop.
will be used for. Throughout the committee's investigation, we found evidence that the Trump campaign and its surrogates misled donors as to where their funds would go and what they would be used for. So not only was there the big lie, there was the big ripoff. Donors deserve to know where their funds are really going. They deserve better than what President Trump and his team did. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Cheney, for a closing statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank all of our witnesses today. And I'd also like to, in particular, wish Mr. Stepien and his family all the best on the arrival of a new baby. Today's hearing, Mr. Chairman, was very narrowly focused. And in the coming days, you will see the committee move on to President Trump's broader planning for January 6th, including his plan to corrupt the Department of Justice and his detailed planning with lawyer John Eastman to pressure the Vice President, state legislatures, state officials, and others to overturn the election. Let me leave you today with one clip to preview what you will see in one of our hearings to come. This is the testimony of White House lawyer Eric Hirschman. John Eastman called Mr. Hirschman the day after January 6th, and here is how that conversation went.
I said to him, "Are you out of your effing mind?" Right? I said, "I only want to hear 2 words coming out of your mouth from now on.
Ooh, I want to be in a
Orderly
bath.
transition."
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
At the conclusion of last week's hearing, we showed you a video of rioters explaining why they had come to Washington on January 6th. It was because Donald Trump told them to be here. Today we heard about some of the lies Donald Trump embraced and amplified when it became clear he didn't have the numbers of votes to win the election. We heard about how officials at different levels of government explored claims of fraud and found no evidence. Yet the former president continued to repeat those false claims over and over again. Today, we'll end things where we did on Thursday, back on January 6th, hearing words of individuals who wanted to stop the transfer of power. We know they were there because of Donald Trump. Now we hear some of the things they believed.
Oh my gosh,
Without
you're
objection,
treating a
I
sunburn.
enter
I'm
into
sorry
the
to hear
record
that. I
video
saw I'm in a bath and I
presentation.
was like instant jealousy switch flipped. I'm so sorry.
Fake election. They think they're gonna fucking cheat us out of our vote and put communist fucking Biden in office. It ain't fucking happening today, buddy.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
Snookums.
Voted early. It went well, except for the can't really trust the software. Dominion software all over.
We voted, and right in the top right-hand corner of the Dominion voting machine that we used, there was a Wi-Fi symbol with 5 bars. So that most definitely connected to the internet, without a doubt. So they stole that from us twice. We're not doing it anymore. We're not taking it anymore. So we're standing up. We're here.
I think you are. I think right now
We're not laying down again.
you're taking it.
President Trump's tally, and you can't stand there and tell me that it worked. I don't want to say that what we're doing is right. But if the election's being stolen, what is it going to take?
The chair requests those in the hearing room remain seated until the Capitol Police have escorted members from the room. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.
All right, let's listen to what the reporters have to say about what happened today.
And so that concludes the second of the January 6 hearings. This one, as advertised, focused primarily on the roots of what has been called the big lie, the Trump insistence that the election was stolen, and then drawing that that last montage there, drawing
that lady was
a
definitely
connection
from Ohio.
to what happened on January 6th, which of course is the point of all this. We saw the president's inner circle pushing back, refuting those claims. The second
Is he
half
inviting objection?
about officials across the country who
I
investigated
can't
those
say that
claims
with
and also found them baseless.
absolute
Among
certainty
those
because I'm not
testifying, former
an
U.S.
expert or
Attorney for
anything, but that's
Georgia,
what
BJ Pak,
my
who testified to
understanding
finding
has
no
been.
evidence of fraud in the state of Georgia.
I believe
Prominent
that's
Republican
what's
attorney
happening.
Ben Ginsburg testified no courtroom found any evidence that charges of fraud were real. And we also heard from former Philadelphia Commissioner Al Schmidt. He said there was no evidence of fraud in his city. He was the lone Republican on Philadelphia's elections board and says he and his staff were harassed by Trump on social media, and he and his family even received death threats from the former president's supporters.
Without objection means they're asking for unanimous consent. If one person responds, I object, it doesn't go. Thank you, Stephen Bueller.
Thoughts, Kristen?
Appreciate you.
Well,
We didn't see
And
the
welcome.
fireworks,
Everybody make sure
in the
that Stephen
second
Bueller
hearing
feels
that we saw
welcome.
in the first hearing, but there were some significant takeaways. The fact that we heard from
I kind of
BJ
wish
Pak,
that I had watched
remember,
this
this
on
is someone who was appointed by former President
C-SPAN
Trump.
again.
So to hear him say there was no evidence of fraud and we weren't going to be swayed by the president's pressure
NBC's
campaign
not too bad,
was significant. And then I think Al Schmidt, the former Philadelphia city commissioner,
Thanks so
was
much for the
significant
10
because he
biddies.
really
I
tried to draw a
appreciate you.
direct link to the president's threats against him and his family that really rallied the public's ire against him. He obviously ultimately decided to resign in the wake of that. And so the committee really trying to show how
Link
damaging
it, Angel
the
Yimu.
president's pressure campaign was. And then Ben Ginsburg,
Let's
who,
watch
as you
Fox
heard
and
there,
see what they're saying. We
detailed
totally
the
can.
various
That
different
just
moments where he
means
has been
that I
engaged in
won't make
election
any
law
money
to lay
today.
out that he did not see, and there was no
I might
fraud
also
found
get
in any
taken
of
off
these court cases. I think was
the
incredibly
air.
significant.
But
Big
we can,
picture here.
like, I
this is something
had
that a lot of
us
people are
planned
watching.
to be
If you look at
live
the Twitter feeds
for
of a
3
number
hours,
of
and it's
Republicans,
only
they are
been
trying
2.
to turn the conversation away from the hearings that we're watching today onto things like inflation, the high price of gas right now. The question is, will these moments resonate, particularly with independent voters, those who may be on the line, those who may not be ready to break with Trump? Will people see this testimony, see these images? They ended again on January 6th. That was a clear strategic decision. Will this sway people and convince them that Trump was at the root of all
Yeah, it
of
appears
this?
they want every line eventually to meet back at January 6th, and that was a testament to that.
And in many ways, to me, it's those last two buckets that we saw right before the hearing ended for the day that feel incredibly significant here. First, you had this linkage between what Congressman Lofgren called the big lie and the big ripoff, basically trying to show that the fundraising after the election was
Hydrate. Don't mind if I
grift
do.
on the
Thank
part
you.
of the Trump campaign, that they were fundraising specifically off something that many of the people involved knew and acknowledged to be a lie, to be not true, and that were those claims of marketing fraud, of election fraud. And I say the word marketing because that came up too, that it was basically like
My
these
computer's
claims of
running
election
low on
fraud were
storage
simply
space. I really
marketing.
need to
That
clean
was
up
what
my
they tried to lay
computer.
out in that video.
Like, really bad.
That's exactly right. Didn't go to this election defense fund that had been created, which, as you pointed out with Danny Savalos in our last break, opens a whole other legal can of worms here. I would say the other piece of it, Lester, you said this whole hearing, and it's about the roots of the so-called big lie.
Kind of want to see what's
of this
going on
election
over
fraud
on
claim. What we
OAN's.
saw in those last 5 minutes there,
Can somebody
in
link,
many ways,
please,
that was the fruit of what had been
OAN's
planted, the seed that had been
YouTube
planted.
channel?
And so you saw these members of these far-right groups, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, coming to the Capitol and regurgitating the very same lies, things that weren't true, that the people around former President Trump knew were not true. And so that is the committee. We talk about connecting the dots. That's the biggest thing they want to do. That's their mission over these next 5 more hearings. That is a critical piece of this because it shows them looking to connect the dots between what Donald Trump said and what these rioters did.
Yeah, we should also point out we're not getting exculpatory evidence here. This is being laid out with, and they make very clear from the very point each time that this is about Donald Trump.
Thank
as
you
being
so much, Angel Yimu.
The person that caused January 6th to happen.
Absolutely. And again, I think what you are starting to see is the dots get
it
connected.
is.
And you hear the rioters echo what you heard from former President Trump and what he tweeted in real time. And I thought it was notable that they said that last campaign and fundraising email was sent out about 30 minutes before the rioters stormed the Capitol. Think about that link and the fact that here you have that ongoing
It opened
fundraising
in an
effort,
OBS
despite the fact
window.
you have
That's
all of
so
these voices saying
weird.
there is no there there. There's no truth to this. And all of these people who are energized by that.
Let's get right to Garrett Hake right now. He's outside the hearing room. Garrett, your take, and what should we be looking for as this moves forward?
Asking where One American News.
Lester, I was thinking about the contrast between the second half of this hearing and the second half of the hearing on Thursday, where on Thursday it was all about emotion. Caroline Edwards' emotional testimony, seeing that violent video for the first time. This
It's behind a
presentation here today
paywall.
wasn't for the general public. It felt like it was for political professionals.
If you want to watch live, it's behind a paywall, which understandable. Like that's the business model right
election
now.
lawyer on the Republican side here, laying out, to your point about exculpatory evidence. This wasn't a presentation to a jury. This was a presentation more like to a grand jury. This is the facts that could be the basis of a prosecution. And so seeing what was kind of a dry GI presentation, but going through each court case that was thrown out, the number of Trump-appointed judges who threw out those court cases, and the sheer weakness of the legal arguments put forward by the Trump team. A different kind of presentation than what we saw last week, but one that the committee may find equally valuable as they put together their case over these next couple of weeks. You also heard that teaser from Liz Cheney at the end, introducing a character to this drama who will become very important, John Eastman, who is an election attorney, sort of election specialist, who availed himself to the Trump team, not the normal Trump team that Bill Stepien described, but the Giuliani and company team, who ultimately developed the legal theory that became the basis for the idea that Mike Pence could somehow set aside the election results on January 6th. We're just beginning to hear John Eastman's name invoked in these hearings. Get ready to hear that a lot more as they progress, Lester.
Garrett,
All right,
thank
so
you. Let's
they're
go to
in
NBC
recess
News
tomorrow.
Washington correspondent Yamiche Alcindor. Yamiche, good to have you back
And
with
it's
us.
again on
let's talk
Wednesday,
about
right?
what we heard there at the end from the rioters
Crocheting is
themselves, or people who
mesmerizing,
were at
hey?
the Capitol on January 6th themselves.
Doesn't Congress have anything
talking
to do with
about a
prosecuting
stolen
Trump now
election
that
in
he's
very
former
much the
pres,
same
or is it
language that we
entirely up to
heard
the
from the
justice system?
president. What does that tell you, about the resilience
all of this
of this story?
What it tells me is that the story was
like these
resilient
are
in a way
or not
that
cabinet
other
members.
things,
These
other
are
claims
like
were
sitting.
not. We think about the fact that lawmakers were really trying to make the argument that this was a lie that metastasized,
from
that it
the House
lost
and
in the
Senate,
courts, that
right?
it lost in other places, that it was not able to prove any sort of credible claim. But that even with all of those losses, even with an alleged coup in search of a legal theory, as the
But they're
congressman
like
said,
they're
even in
technically a
that
committee,
they were
so
able to
I don't know.
metastasize and grow this movement.
I
through
guess I
fundraising,
really just
through
don't know
marketing, through
enough about
convincing
the
people
anatomy of
that
this
happened. I think
situation
it's
to be
important
able
that
to
we saw
answer
lawmakers
you
go through all of the
effectively.
different things that
I
we heard on the
apologize.
internet, the stolen boxes, the dead people, all of these different claims that the people close to President Trump were making at the
that's
time.
rough.
But
Hi,
then
Gimmick Gamers. Good to
eventually,
see you.
even
How are
when all
you?
of that was cleared, even when the table was cleared and the people that were closest to the president, they sort of
Committee of the
faded
House,
away
yeah.
one by one out of the picture. That the people that started to fill the picture were everyday Americans who were then assembling at the Capitol, who were then eating
You have an
all of the different
incision.
lines that President Trump was putting out there. This really shows also that the lawmakers here are really trying to, I think, begin to make a new picture, which is while these people, the campaign aides, all of the people who had experiences, while they faded away and distanced themselves from the former president, that new people came in, and that those new people really are building a movement that is threatening our democracy. I also think it's really interesting that they played video of Attorney General Barr saying that the DOJ doesn't take side in elections. That tells you that that's exactly where we're going to be going next, is looking into how the Justice Department was pressured
I'm
by
not
former
sure.
President Trump.
Balbo?
Yamiche,
I
thanks
don't
very
know.
much. Before we wrap up, I do want to get final thoughts from both of you. One thing that stands out to me were the criticisms that there was nothing new in these things. But if you've never seen it before, it's new to you. And I think the
Balbo,
idea
I
that
in
seems to be
specific
trying
am
to get
a
Americans
very
engaged and to
slow
really understand
crocheter.
from A
I
to
think that
Z
knitting
what
tends to
transpired
work
here.
up
I do
faster
think, based
depending on
conversations
the
with
pattern
Democratic
that
members
you're
of
working
Congress,
on.
They have their eyes on the
It's
history
kind
books
of
here. I think
comparing
there's
apples
been
and
some
oranges,
framing
though,
of this in
because
political
there's some
terms, et cetera,
slow
and
to
those are
work
discussions
knitting
that can be
and
had
some slow
at
to
another
work
time. But at this
crochet,
point,
and likewise
almost unanimously,
some
the discussion has been
fast
around
to
laying out
work
an
knitting
accurate
and some
record of
fast
what
to work
specifically
crochet.
happened based on that first
Yeah, I have an
person
obnoxious
testimony from
incision
people
site
like
that is
Bill
healing
Steppe,
from
people
my
like BJ Pak, people who we heard
parietal
from
abscess.
today.
You did
As a
tell us
worker,
that you
right?
had
For
that.
these are the facts.
Is it
and
feeling
this is what
better? Are
happened.
you
I will say, as we
okay?
look ahead to the next hearing, which will be on
You did
Wednesday,
not
it
tell
will
us that you went
focus
to the
on the
ER, I
Department
don't
of Justice
think.
and on the
I hope you're
turmoil
doing
that was
better,
happening
bud.
inside the
I
DOJ
have been
as the
thinking
then
about
president
you.
was
I know
continuing
that
to perpetuate
those
these
abscesses are
claims
one of
that
the
were
most
not
painful
true
things
about
that
so-called
humans can
election fraud.
experience.
Jeff Rosen,
I know
for
that.
example, set to testify. Rich Donahue, who you saw a little bit of the taped testimony in that, set to be witnesses here. And so I think you will start to see as they lay out this narrative, right? They are sort of putting the crumbs on the path, and so that's the next set that's to come.
All right, Kristen, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think part of the goal and the challenge for the committee right
Bardic
now
Muse,
is
I'm
to
with
keep
you.
the momentum going and to keep the public engaged, because
Depression,
this is an historical
anxiety,
record, but they do
all
want
of the
eyes
like
on this
neuro
as
problems
well.
that
And
I
so
have
will they be able to keep
affects
the public's
sleep.
interest?
So I
and
have
again,
like
Wednesday is going to
really
focus on the
bad
pressure campaign
insomnia
within the
when it's
DOJ by
bedtime,
former President Trump,
and then I
we move
spend
on to the
all
pressure
day
campaign
being
of
so
former Vice
sleepy.
President Mike
It's
Pence.
the
And I
worst.
think this is going to be one of the pivotal moments of these hearings, because we have seen the former vice president break with his former boss in the months after January 6th, but it certainly took him a long time to publicly start to say that. And that moment where he was on the House floor and then evacuated with everyone else when the January 6th rioters entered the Capitol. And the fact that we know, based on our reporting, former President Trump never called to check on his whereabouts. I think that that's going to be a critical piece in connecting these dots, which we've been talking about.
All right, Kristen, Holly, thanks to both of you. That concludes our NBC News special coverage of day 2 of the historic House committee hearings on the January 6th riots at the Capitol. I'll have much more tonight on Nightly News, and we'll, of course, have live coverage on Wednesday for that hearing. I'm Lester Holt. Thank you for watching. I'll see you a bit later on tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. All right. Well, we learned some things. I would have way preferred to watch on C-SPAN. Well, anyway, here's that chart. We can take a look at it here. So this is what we have. It starts with grounded in reality. Sorry, I feel sufficiently insurrect for the day. Good. Question, why not just arrest everyone known to be involved so they can't leave the country? You can't just arrest people. Like, you have to have, there has to be probable cause to arrest people. Yo, a new time slot for stream? No. No, it's just that we're covering these insurrection hearings. I'm dead to the world right now. I'm so tired. So sorry. And they are happening at this time. Thank goodness that I am here, where it is later here than it is anywhere in the United States. So I get up at 11 as opposed to like 6 a.m. in some areas for this. Yeah, all the people in California right now, it's 10 a.m. right now. So they had to, I think it's 10 a.m. in California. No, it's 8 a.m. in California. So it started at 6 a.m. for them. Like, I would have just had to stay up overnight for that. The evidence is overwhelmingly damning. That's where I'm confused. Well, I don't know, man. There's not enough evidence of laws being broken by all the people that they would want to arrest, right? They have been able to arrest a lot of the lackeys, a lot of the insurrectionists and stuff. And you're currently on Pacific time? Oh, okay, shit. My bad. Okay, my bad. Anyway, okay. So these are all things that did happen under the fucking government. Like the government made this shit happen. I don't know what Project Mockingbird is. But all the rest, I don't know what the Tuskegee experiment is. All of this other stuff I've heard of. It's weird that Free Britney's here. Like, that's more a corrupt couple of lawyers and her dad being a piece of shit than anything else. Like, my main view is ACAB, but at the same time, I want the system to come through. I completely 100% in agreement with you, Shardies. Like, please don't feel like I disagree with you. Like, I'm just answering the questions that you put forward to the best of my ability. A wiretapping operation initiated by United States President John F. Kennedy to identify the sources of government leaks by eavesdropping on the communications of journalists. This is zoomed in. I apologize. So I can't really. Wait. How's that? Is that better? And then this is the we have questions. Jimmy Hoffa disappearance. We live in a simulation. JFK assassination. Area 51 UFOs. Charles Manson as a CIA asset. Denver International Airport. Epstein didn't kill himself. Well, for sure, Epstein didn't kill himself. And, like, there's precedence for Charles Manson being a CIA asset. And the fact that we haven't figured out anything about the JFK assassination tells me that the government did have something to do with that. The rest of this stuff, man, I feel like is pretty tinfoil hat. I want to believe Area 51 and UFOs. I want to believe, but I cannot. Okay, so reality denial. So this is where, like, if you take a passing interest in this stuff and you start to notice yourself going further up this upside down pyramid, like, you are becoming radicalized, I think, is what the point of this chart is here. Okay, so Avril Lavigne replaced. Greta Thunberg is a time traveler. I have not heard that. Stevie Wonder isn't blind. Elvis lives. Titanic never sank. Tupac alive in Serbia. Prince Charles is a vampire. Kylie, I'm sorry that I'm laughing. Like, some of you probably have relatives that believe this stuff. My relatives probably believe this stuff, but I don't fucking talk to my relatives who probably believe this stuff. Mattress for money laundering scheme. Is that unequivocally false? I guess I heard really good evidence for this being like what up, but never followed through on it. I'm screaming at Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer. That shit cracks me up too. I want to know about Greta Thunberg is a time traveler. What's this about Manson being a CIA asset? Oh, you should read about that. Oh, you should read about that. Anne Frank wasn't blind or deaf. Where is that here somewhere? Are you thinking of Helen Keller? Okay, dangerous to yourself and others. Chemtrails, definitely. Biden is a robot? I did not know that. COVID is a bioweapon was something that oof. It hurt. It hurt talking about this on like Facebook. This is what gave me Facebook fatigue so bad that I haven't posted on Facebook in ages. 5G is toxic. They do that every time they upgrade the number of G's. Soy Boys is ridiculous. You guys should watch H-Bomber Guy. If you guys don't watch H-Bomber Guy, you should. I don't know what phantom time is. Jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams is one of the dumbest arguments ever. It's tissue paper thin. Don't know what Tartaria is. Antifa did January 6th is just fucking Baked Alaska and Nick Fuentes both attest to being there among friends. So like all the people that like are recognizable that were there that are like Trump puppets, they either need to shut the fuck up if they want to say that Antifa did January 6th, or they need to outwardly say that wasn't Antifa, that was us protesting. I've heard that in Australia there is an ice wall where there are guards on it. On the other side of the wall is the factory where world leaders like Biden are crafted. Okay. Okay. Cut her some slack. She's only 12. She's like 19 now. Aw, bless Greta. Bless her. She is so brave and so smart. And if I ever have a daughter, I hope that they are just like Greta. Global warming as a hoax is one of the most infuriating one of the most infuriating things to have to talk about with conservatives. Honestly, just kind of just looking at this is starting to like give me PTSD. That Wayfair trafficking thing, that was so fascinating. Like to just entertain the thought of that being true. It like the whole time you're reading it, you're like, this is not true. This is not real. But like, as you put the evidence together, it's like, have you ever done that thing where you put together all of the coincidences between JFK and Abraham Lincoln? Anyway, that's what it felt like doing the Wayfair trafficking stuff. What's this about trees? Are trees a hoax? Where's trees? Is it the feral people in the forest that you're talking about? I don't see trees anywhere. Oh, ancient giant trees. I'm just a big Dumbo. I apologize. Yeah, I don't know. A bunch of these I haven't heard of. This one gets me upset. Any anti-vaxxing stuff, I am not nice to anti-vaxxers. I am a full-on bully. I'm a full-on bully to anti-vaxxers, and I need to learn to be better about that. Okay, and I feel like there's going to be a bunch of stuff here that I've never heard of in my life. World ruled by supreme shadow elite promotes hatred and violence towards marginalized groups. Yeah, okay, all of this stuff is like, almost all of this stuff leads to hatred of Jewish people. Adrenochrome, yeah. Yeah. Bill Gates depopulation. Why would he ever want that? I've never heard of Nasera. Hollywood is turning your kids gay. I don't know what Rothschild Central Bank is. Jewish space lasers. Oh, geez. I don't know what this is about George Floyd being a crisis actor. Nazis on the moon. Hollow Earth. I love that they used the like Tolkien font here. I bully the hell out of anti-vaxxers. I very bully them. It's really bad. I say very uncool, not nice things. Yeah, these are Protocols of the Elders of Zion is my new all-female black metal band, by the way. I need a guitarist, a bassist, and a drummist right now. And then whatever weird instrument we decide to add. Probably piano if it's going to be black metal. I don't know. We could get really funky with it and do a theremin or something. That's exactly what all of this is. Anti-Semitism? Yes, 100%. At a hurdy-gurdy! Fuck yeah. Worst thing I've crossed with someone I know that thinks the 5G network is to spread COVID. Yeah, I've genuinely, my brother started to believe that shit before I was like, I will slap the fucking taste right out of your mouth, you fucking idiot. Shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. Harpsichords do go hard. Ooh, I think I do want a harpsichord for my black metal band. Angel Yumu. You get me. You get me. Okay. Well, fuck. I didn't have anything else planned. I expected today to go longer than last time. So for Wednesday, I will plan something longer. Like, I will plan stuff for after the trial. Ooh, glass harmonicas. Yeah. Apparently the ancient trees thing came out of the flat earth crowd. Surprise. But I think I'm gonna call it here. Thank you for re-7 next. I appreciate you. I'm gonna get a nap, and if I'm able to get a nap in and be ready to rock for later tonight too, we could still have our regular stream tonight too. But if I can't get a nap in and like feel well rested and stuff, then I'll just see you for the normal time tomorrow, and then on Wednesday I will have some content planned for after the trial. So I'll keep you posted. Y'all follow me on Twitter. And join the Discord. Hello, Lurky McLurkleston. What a fun name. Appreciate you. Y'all, discord.gg/fartslide, twitter.com/ZER0DOXY. I will try very, very, very hard to be here later, but there's just a ton of stuff that I need to do. Top of the conspiracy pyramid is the Doxy Discord. No, actually, it's my Patreon because there's no tangible rewards for it. So real huge, hearty, girthy shout out to Big Wolf Paws, Quinn Kenobi, Laura Cody, and Katie Bailey for giving me $5 a month for no reason whatsoever. You the real MVPs. I appreciate you. And let me get y'all sent on your way to somebody else here. I'm gonna just hold on a second. Get that music going. There we go. I'm gonna find somebody for y'all to raid. If I could get you guys to all say what your favorite cryptid is in chat so that you're nice and active and this raid is girthy as fuck, I would appreciate that a whole lot. Hang tight, and maybe I will see you later. If not, definitely I will see you tomorrow. Have a good night, chat.